Hello, devotedscholar.com here. We're going to go over Act 1, Scene 3 today of Romeo and Juliet. So let's go ahead and get started.
Scene 3. Room in Capulet's house. Enter Lady Capulet and nurse.
Nurse, where's my daughter? Call her forth to me.
Now by my maidenhead, at 12-year-old, I bade her come. What lamb, what ladybird? God forbid, where's this girl? What, Juliet?
Enter Juliet.
How now? Who calls?
Your mother.
Madam, I am here. What is your will?
This is the matter. Nurse, give leave a while, we must talk in secret. Nurse, come back again. I have remembered me. Thou's hear our counsel. Thou knowest my daughter's of a pretty age.
Faith, I can tell her age unto an hour.
She's not 14.
I'll lay 14 of my teeth. And yet, to my teen it be spoken, I have but 4. She is not 14. How long is it now to Lammastide?
A fortnight, and odd days.
Even or odd of all days in the year, come Lammas Eve at night, she shall be 14. Susan and she, God rest all Christian souls, were of an age. Well, Susan is with God. She was too good for me. But as I said, on Lammas Eve at night shall she be 14. That she may, Mary, I remember it well. 'Tis since the earthquake now 11 years, and she was weaned. I never shall forget it, of all the days of the year, upon that day. For I had then laid wormwood to my dug, sitting in the sun under the dove-house wall. My lord and you were then at Mantua. Nay, I do bear a brain, but as I said, when it did taste the wormwood on the nipple of my dug, and felt it bitter, pretty fool, to see it tetchy, and fall out with the dug. Shake, quoth the dove-house, 'twas no need, I trow, to bid me trudge. And since that time it is 11 years, for then she could stand alone. Nay, by the rood, she could have run and waddled all about. For even the day before she broke her brow, and then my husband, God be with his soul, was a merry man, took up the child. Yea, quoth he, dost thou fall upon thy face? Thou wilt fall backward when thou hast more wit. Wilt thou not, Jule? And by my holy dame, the pretty wretch left crying, and said, I. To see now how a jest shall come about. I warrant, and I should live 1,000 years, I never should forget it. Wilt thou not, Jule, quoth he, and pretty fool it stinted, and said, I.
Enough of this. I pray thee, hold thy peace.
Yes, madam. Yet I cannot choose but laugh, to think it should leave crying and say I. And yet I warrant it had upon its brow a bump as big as a young cockerel stone, a perilous knock, and it cried bitterly. Yea, quoth my husband, fall'st upon thy face? Thou wilt fall backward when thou comest to age. Wilt thou not, Jule? It stinted and said I.
And stint thou too, I pray thee, nurse, say I.
Peace, I have done. Thou wast the prettiest babe that e'er I nursed, and I might live to see thee married once I have my wish.
Marry. That marry is the very theme I came to talk of. Tell me, daughter Juliet, how stands your disposition to be married?
It is an honour that I dream not of.
An honour! Were not I thine only nurse, I would say thou hadst sucked wisdom from thy teat.
Well, think of marriage now. Younger than you, here in Verona, ladies of esteem, are made already mothers. By my count, I was your mother much upon these years that you are now a maid. Thus, then, in brief, the valiant Paris seeks you for his love.
A man, young lady, such a man as all the world. Why, he's a man of wax.
Verona's summer hath not such a flower.
Nay, he's a flower, in faith, a very flower.
Let's pause right quick because before we get into Lady Capulet's conversation about Paris, let's look what has been said thus far. So, we learn a couple things here. First off, Lady Capulet is looking for Juliet. She runs into Nurse and she asks her to call her. Nurse does, and then Lady Capulet basically says, leave for a while. I must talk in secret with my daughter. And the nurse is going to leave. And then she suddenly says, I've remembered me. Thou's hear our counsel. Thou knowest my daughter of a pretty age. And nurse says, Faith, I can tell her age unto an hour. So we can tell right away that Lady Capulet is not necessarily comfortable with being alone with Juliet and telling her this big news of a potential marriage. And really, Nurse is almost closer to Juliet than her own mother is. Nurse knows her age of Juliet within the hour. And Lady Capulet says she's not yet 14. We know that she is not going to be 14 until Lammas-tide, which is about 2 weeks away. So really, this always shocks my students. Juliet is only 13 at the time of this play, and she's just 2 weeks away from being 14, so quite young. And again, a fortnight and odd days, that's about 2 weeks. Nurse also goes into this long speech, which we call a monologue. Remember, a monologue is a long speech given on the stage in the presence of other characters. And she is talking about a bunch of different stuff here. But something that I think is really important is she talks about how Juliet is going to be 14 come Lammas Eve, and that Susan and she, God rest all Christian souls, were of an age. Well, Susan is with God. She was too good for me. But as I said, on Lammas Eve at night shall she be 14. She keeps talking about Susan, and we know that Susan has passed on. We can infer here that Susan is, or was rather, because she's passed on, Nurse's daughter. And this is not surprising because again, children died a lot during this time period. It was very dangerous to be a child just because there were so many potential things that could happen that could kill you. And secondly, we know that Nurse was Juliet's wet nurse, meaning that she basically breastfed Juliet and raised her from baby time, from a baby to a young woman. And the reason that she did that is because rich women used to hire out wet nurses because they didn't want to deal with the burden of it. So Nurse is really close with Juliet, pretty much like a mother. And she talks about nursing her and her husband meeting Juliet. And there's some really kind of dirty jokes going on here. I'm not going to go into great detail, but I imagine you could probably figure it out if you were really determined. But Lady Capulet says, okay, enough of this. I pray, hold thy peace. Because Nurse just rants and rants and rants. And then she starts talking again, continuing the story that about her husband and Juliet meeting. And Juliet even says, please stop, I pray thee, Nurse. Finally, Nurse says, peace, peace, I've done. And she brings up this subject of marriage and how she wishes to see Juliet married at one point. And Lady Capulet says, Mary is the very theme I came to talk of. Tell me, daughter Juliet, how stands your disposition to be married? Lady Capulet is feeling out what Juliet thinks about being married. And Juliet says, it's an honor that I dream not of. Nurse is, oh, that's such a good answer. And so they're excited that Juliet might potentially get married to somebody. Lady Capulet then introduces the idea of the valiant Paris seeking to marry Juliet. And Nurse says, oh, Paris, why, he's a man of wax. What a hunk. So we know right away that Lady Capulet and Nurse are both in favor of this potential marriage. And Lady Capulet also says, Verona's summer hath not such a flower. He is a hottie, and he is would be a great catch for Juliet. So here we have Lady Capulet's long speech here again, and I want you to pay attention to the rhyme scheme and look for an extended metaphor, because after we read through it, you're going to see that some literary elements are at play here. All right, here we go.
Say you, can you love the gentleman? This night you shall behold him at our feast. Read o'er the volume of young Paris's face, and find delight writ there with beauty's pen. Examine every married lineament, and see how one another lends content, and what obscured in this fair volume lies, find written in the margent of his eyes. This precious book of love, this unbound lover, to beautify him only lacks a cover. The fish lives in the sea, and 'tis much pride for fair without the fair within to hide. That book in many's eyes doth share the glory, that in gold clasps locks in the golden story. So shall you share all that he doth possess, by having him, making yourself no less.
No less, nay bigger. Women grow by men.
Speak briefly, can you like of Paris's love?
I'll look to like, if looking liking move. But no more deep will I endart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly.
Enter a servant.
Madam, the guests are come, supper served up. You called, my young lady asked for, the nurse cursed in the pantry, and everything in extremity. I must hence to wait. I beseech you follow straight.
We follow thee.
Exit servant.
Juliet, the county stays.
Go, girl. Seek happy nights to happy days.
Exit.
Okay. I don't know if you guys caught it, but this is a sonnet. If you look at the rhyme scheme, and follow through with the iambic pentameter, you will see that Lady Capulet here is speaking in a sonnet. Also, she gives an extended metaphor here, comparing Paris to a book. She says, look over the volume, think of volumes in a book, of Paris's face. Find the delight there, written there with beauty's pen. Examine every married lineament, okay? Content, obscured volumes, written in the margent of his eyes, this precious book of love, this unbound lover, to beautify him only lacks a cover. Again, we see this extended metaphor all with books, and then also you see him kind of being compared to a fish here, and he was compared to a flower up here as well. So, she ends by saying, making yourself no less, and Nurse says, no less, nay bigger, women grow by men. Again, we have Nurse, our rowdy character, where she's really kind of crude, and what she's implying here is that women get pregnant by men, and thus they grow bigger. So, it just kind of comes in and is the comedic relief here. Juliet agrees to look at Paris, but she says, no more deep will I endart mine eye, and then your consent gives strength to make it fly. She's going to look at him, but she's not committing to anything yet. And Juliet and Nurse are happy with this, because I think they think that once Juliet meets Paris, she's going to fall for him. But let's wait and see. We know it's not called Juliet in Paris, so I'm kind of skeptical. All right. With that said, let's go over to our summary here. And if you guys look at Act 1, Scene 3, here are the highlights. It says, Lady Capulet goes to see Juliet about marrying Paris. Nurse rambles on and speaks crudely. We learn that Juliet will be 14 in 2 weeks. Juliet says she hasn't thought much about marriage. And Juliet agrees to meet Paris at the party that night. But again, she doesn't agree to marry him yet. She's just going to kind of check him out and see what he's all about. I hope this video was helpful for you, and stay tuned for Act 1, Scene 4. It'll be coming out soon. And if you would like to look at any additional resources I have for this flipped unit, you can look at devotedscholar.com. Thanks for watching, and have a great day. Thanks.